Good evening. Well, thank you. Thank you for coming to tonight's program, Culinary Cousins, Roots, Heart, and Soul, featuring our special guest, Chef Todd Richards. We are thrilled to have you with us here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture to explore food, memory, and the rich cultural legacy of the African diaspora. I'm Leslie Walker, the program production supervisor here at the museum, and it is my pleasure to welcome you, but also to introduce someone whose leadership, insight, and passion for storytelling has shaped much of what we do here at the museum. And I'm speaking of Dr. Michelle Commander, who serves as our deputy director here at the museum. She's a scholar of African American and African diaspora studies and a leading voice in public history and literature. Her work bridges the past and the present, helping us to understand the deep connections between culture, identity, and history. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Michelle Commander.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the National Museum of African American History and Culture. As Leslie said, I'm Michelle Commander, the museum's deputy director. My work as a scholar and a curator focuses on how memory, history, and imagination intersect in the lives and movements of people of African descent. I have long explored how Black communities remember, reclaim, and reshape narratives of slavery and freedom, whether through literature, cultural practices, or the act of traveling itself, which encompasses both physical and imaginative journeys. And when I was doing a lot of that work in the early 2000s, it took me to lots of places, the US South, and thinking about how people were creating Africa in my home state of South Carolina. But then I bridged out. I was in Ghana for many years, as well as Northeast Brazil, mostly in Bahia. So during my travels to Ghana, and I also had a Fulbright there where I taught at the University of Ghana, I examined how the histories of slavery and emancipation continue to shape contemporary identities and senses of belonging. These Black geographies connect Africa to its diaspora and highlight powerful stories of resilience, creativity, and community. Tonight's discussion is inspired by two of our museum's exhibitions, In Slavery's Wake and Cultural Expressions. Both exhibitions explore how people of African descent have carried traditions, memories, and identities across continents, generations, and culinary practices. I am honored to introduce our esteemed moderator and featured presenter for tonight's conversation. Joanne Hyppolite is the supervisory curator of the African Diaspora here at the museum. Her Haitian American heritage and research inform her curatorial voice and perspective on diasporic cultural expressions. Our special guest is Chef Todd Richards, an acclaimed chef and James Beard-winning author. His culinary work celebrates the diversity, ingenuity, and cultural significance of diasporic cuisine. He is the author of Roots, Heart, Soul, the story, celebration, and recipes of African cuisine in America. Together, they will explore stories of migration, foodways, and the powerful role that cooking plays in preserving heritage, cultivating joy, and fostering community. Please join me in welcoming Joanne and Chef Richards.
Are we on? Hey, everybody.
I believe we are on. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Chef, we're so glad to have you here with us today.
I am thrilled to be here. I think quiet as it's kept. I'm from Chicago, live in Atlanta, but DC is one of my favorite places to go. So.
Well, we love that you love DC, and
Yes.
we know that a lot of us here love Atlanta and Chicago as well, some of our favorite places to visit. But
Even though I think I have the best mumbo wing sauce ever.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh no.
So I think I have it. So, you know, we'll find out sooner or later.
We started food wars already, y'all. Let's talk about this wonderful cookbook.
Yeah.
You've said that this cookbook is a celebration of how African cuisine transformed the Americas. What made you want to go in that direction for this cookbook, and how is it different from your last one?
The first thing word is celebration, and I really got kind of tired of hearing the slave narrative or the survival narrative of this food. And when you think about how rice is cultivated and it takes skill and know-how, when you think about how watermelon is one of the most delicious foods, but also most nutritious foods, and we have caricatures of ourselves, being shamed for that. But then you go into this aisle, at $7.95 for a watermelon shot, someone else is taking advantage of that story. I say it's required for us to celebrate it first and then hold other people accountable to celebrate it as well. So that's where the celebration came from. And then also, just understanding like my DNA, like I was so curious about where did I come from? I knew where my grandmother and all of them came, but where did I come from and why do I keep gravitating to this food? Knowing that, I ran 3 Ritz-Carltons, I understand French, Italian, Japanese, I understand all that, but I still gravitate back to this. And I wanted to know why that was so entrenched in me. Why did, my first book sold, why did it have, 9 collard green recipes in that book? It's really just telling the story of my family, and then I see people of the same hues, shapes, and sizes want to tell their story, and that's how I really wanted to understand it. And then, selfishly, it's just delicious. So that's got to be the first requirement. You can't write a cookbook about something doesn't taste good. So it's historic, it's celebratory, and it's damn good. So that's how I got there.
All right. Now, research, right? That's probably where you start with everything when you're trying to decide on write a cookbook, right? And trying to decide what you're going to put in it. But you started researching this book during the pandemic. What was that like, and how did your research evolve over time, traveling to different cities and different countries and talking to people there?
I have naturally we all have sore spots for the pandemic. I have one, I had COVID really bad. I went in my house on March 30th, and I didn't come out of my house till May 15th. That's how bad I was the first time I've had it. Subsequently, I've had it, 3 times, 2 or 3 times after that. So I intimately understand how bad it is. And then, we had a wild idea to write a cookbook. And then when you're writing a cookbook, it takes a lot of research naturally. You just don't, you can't just Google everything. You actually have to be there. You have to put your hands, on people's shoulders, look over them and see how they're cooking. You have to put your feet in the ground, to stand there, stand tall with people and understand it. But we couldn't do that during COVID. So we started, say, well, okay, let's go to libraries. We did all that research, but soon as they said the travel ban was over, we were on the plane. We were ready to go. However, at that point in time, though, the book is already due. So we started doing all the food photography before we even finished writing the book, which is very difficult. And then putting together a team to do so is really difficult during the pandemic because some people still didn't want to travel and go about it. So we took my condo, took all the furniture out, myself, Thomas Driver, who was in the first book, Clay Williams, who is shooting everybody's cookbook right now. I mean, Clay Williams is so, fantastic as a photographer. We did all the food photography in 4 days in my condo.
Wow.
For this book. So when you have that kind of dedication, and it's not about me. I'm not telling my story in here. I did that in Seoul. I'm telling story, from pre-me, pre-my family being here, but also all the other chefs that helped me in this book, like Stefan from Haiti, Mashama Bailey, who was a really great friend of mine, James Beard Award winner in Savannah. I'm so jealous. Mashama was just in France. She was cooking for Veuve Clicquot champagne. It's like, she called me, can you help me with this recipe? Like, can you give me a damn ticket to Paris? Go drink champagne, But, when you have those kind of people, the magnitude of people that are giving you their story to help you write this book, you have to do everything you can to make sure you're telling the story properly.
I agree with you. Yeah, and I can definitely tell. And you also profile some of them in the book as well, so you give them the credit for that.
I mean, it's only the right thing to do. I mean, Jackie Summers, when he's talking about hibiscus, we talked about this earlier, and everyone loves Kool-Aid, red drink, and understand that Kool-Aid, like my granddad's recipe for Kool-Aid is the best still. It's 2 packets, 4 cups of sugar, 10 cups of water, and 4 cups of lemon lime soda. You know what, so.
I was asking him, when was the last time I had Kool-Aid? Y'all remember the last time when you had Kool-Aid? No, right?
Oh, you got
coming back.
I mean, it's such a highbrow crowd out here,
I was struck by the way that you trace connections between foods like beignets and puff puff, or fufu and mofongo, and I think we have a photograph of mofongo coming up here. As a Haitian American who studies foodways, I see these culinary threads all of the time. But what did this cross-diaspora journey reveal to you about the adaptability and resilience of African food traditions?
The great thing is that it gives me pockets and regions of people. It helped me understand terroir, it helped me understand ingenuity. I mean, it takes a lot to ground grits or ground corn to make grits, to make mofongos, a lot to process cassava. It takes a lot of those things, and you just have to have some type of more than just ingenuity, but you also have to have some knowledge of the land and things like that. But what I found also was that the eating with hands is so important to the culture of eating these foods that the starches had to be cultivated or had to be manufactured in the cooking process. And when you look at it from that standpoint, you can see how, where the Spanish influence came in here, with the mofongo, and you see, where the fufu and why, shrimp and grits is so popular between New Orleans and Haiti because of that cross connection between Haiti and New Orleans, which makes sense that the texture of those dishes are the same. So it's almost like a drum to me. It has a sound, it has a rhythm in understanding the way that people can take the same ingredient and approach it slightly differently. But also the spices that went along with it, which was so significant to me. Like in the mofongo, with the ham hock, people, traditionally just think about ham hocks like put them in greens and beans and stuff like that. But when you think about putting it in a pot, and slowly cooking plantains and then pulling that meat off and eating it all together, now you have this whole range of dishes where that can go to. And I can take that same ham hock and plantain, with the fried egg. To me that's one dish, but then I can, add, pickles to it, and go in a whole different way. Or I can add collard greens to it and go in a whole different way and still be representative of the original culture where it came from. So it's like a linchpin to linking us all together instead of dividing us at the table.
And how do you think regions where you live affects how those foodways turn out? There are regional differences, I think, between some of the immigrant cuisines. So you won't find Haitian food tasting the same necessarily in New York as it does in Miami, as it does in Haiti, for instance, right? Or Cuban food. What do you think that's about?
Well, you think about the triangle of PR, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Haiti, and think about sofrito, and the war, that you will have with if you take a Puerto Rican sofrito recipe to Haiti, that's gonna, and if you go to take a Dominican recipe sofrito to Puerto Rico, you're gonna have, an issue, and even when you think about other things like on a podcast. We were talking about conch, and the chef that we had on was from Bahamas. And he said, that's the conch capital of the world. And Stefan from Haiti was on there, was saying, well, Haitians make very good conch. Now, we had a whole script of what this whole hour was supposed to be about. And the first 35 minutes was these two arguing about conch recipes, and who's better and why is it better and everything like that. I'm just a moderator at that point, I'm just, I'm trying to jot down notes for recipes and things like that. But that's what makes it so much fun, to argue about whose recipe is great. It's really protecting, your legacy, your culture, your people, your food, and it has honor and things like that. Now, I told him we got to get in the kitchen now. We got to figure out, which conch is better, Right, I mean, right. And I'm going to be a glutton because I'm going to eat it all. So, it makes sense for me. Yeah.
But what you're saying is also about honoring innovation and whoever's hand is in the kitchen, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, innovation is always happening. sometimes it could breed bad habits as well. So we have to be a little bit careful about not going too far. I mean, I'll give a perfect example. You know, we have microwave ovens, and no one here is going to roast a chicken in a microwave, right? You know, I mean, but microwaves serve, you know, really great purposes. You know, you're a single parent, you have a kid that come home from school and they need to have something to eat. You know, you can safely have them put something in the microwave and feed themselves compared to as I grew up, you know, turning on the gas stove, you know, and the pilot not lighting, and your parent walk in the house and the whole house, you know, smells like gas. You know. So innovation is good, but we have to be careful that we don't overuse it or we don't use it in the right form or format.
All right. So speaking of regions, you grew up in Chicago, but you now live in Atlanta. How have these two places influenced the way you think about food and cooking?
Well, bias. Chicago is still the most beautiful architectural city in the world. It has the most delicious food in the world. And Atlanta, when I first got to Atlanta, it was 1.9 million people. Now it's about 6.1 million people. 285 around the perimeter was all farmland, and now our area is getting very crowded. Our home taxes went up 100% in 2 years. So you see that everyone wants to come there. One thing that makes Atlanta a great melting pot is everyone wants to come there. What makes Atlanta different from a restaurant scene is that everyone wants to come there. And so everyone's bringing in all their own, you know, biases and things like that. And so Atlanta does not really have a true cuisine right now. And so, you know, we are really fighting now, trying how to bring that back, especially now we have Michelin there. We always had James Beard, but now Michelin is coming and things like that. So it's very difficult. The way it kind of shaped me, though, is that I understand both. I understand Chicago's, you know, Midwestern cuisine. But I also understand the South in the sense that these are all cooking techniques. You can fry chicken between 280 degrees and 355 degrees. Water boils at a certain temperature, ice. And so it's really about ingredients and using them properly.
What do you have to look to find Atlanta's true cuisine? Like, where do you go to find that again?
So you know, the areas that we always talk about, you see the, you know, Busy Bee, you always see those places on there. But you gotta go in the hood. I mean, I'll just be honest, you gotta go in the hood to understand, you know, where you can still get a fried pork chop sandwich for $5.95, you know. And then you just need to talk to those people because they know where every other spot is. I think, you know, from a fine dining standpoint, you do have a lot of legacy people like Jerry Cascala from Aria and things like that. But you still have to go into the hood and understand. And the hood in Atlanta is not what it used to be. I mean, it used to be, I mean, I wouldn't even go over there, you know. But now, I mean, it's just changed in the sense that everyone's welcome because we understand that everyone spends money. And everyone wants that cultural influence. They want to understand. And they want to brag, you know, around the water cooler. Yeah, I went to the Southwest Atlanta, you know, and I didn't get shot, you know, and I didn't get robbed, you know, and I ate a fried pork chop sandwich next to the guy, you know, who's up all night drinking all night, you know. So, I mean, you know, everyone wants to have cred based off of what we do anyway.
Wow, that's a great answer. Thank you for that. So we got to talk about beach spaghetti, and I know we have a picture of that in the slides here tonight as well.
This is probably one of my, you know, you're not supposed to have, you know, recipes are like kids. You're not supposed to have a favorite, but.
Tell us about that dish and what it represents and why you chose to include it in the book. Doesn't it look good, y'all?
Man, that does look good. That's actually a pot in my house, so our house. We actually. So spaghetti, you know, really came, you know, from the DR, and we were talking about how they used to take, you know, just pots of spaghetti to the beach, and they would sit there, and they would use salami and things like that. This one's a little bit fancy because I use peppered salami and peas and all that stuff. For me, I'm still a chef, but you know, it really just you know, shows what people would do in DR, and they would just take pots of spaghetti to the beach. But what made this really special in putting this in it, because like growing up in Chicago, we would fry fish and spaghetti, you know, and we would take that to Lakeshore Drive and sit there and eat it on the beach, you know. So here it is, you know, someone, I mean, when I first saw this, you know, it's representation of someone actually taking, you know, spaghetti to a beach. It's like, these are my people, because like I've been doing this since I was a kid, and we would go, to, everyone seen the Blues Brothers, where they jumped across the bridge. So, I mean, that was right around the corner from my house, where we grew up. So, you got this aspect of, someone, theirs has salami and, we fry fish, but it was like that act of eating it, and you sit there and, you slurp spaghetti, you got the waves crashing in, and you can romanticize about it now because you can see it not only through your lens, but through someone else's lens, and understand that conversation. And the chef that helped me, he spoke no English, when he helped me really construct this dish, but we had a food language, which we both understood, and that to me is how you really bring people together.
And when you first learned of it, was it in the Dominican Republic, or did you pick it up from a chef who told you about it?
So we didn't make it to the DR first. We wanted to make it, then we made it afterwards. So we did it down in Fort Lauderdale with chef there. Then we finally made it over there. But the biggest thing that was really unique about it was that only on some sides of his family did salami. Other sides, they did seafood, like they would do calamari, they would do squid, they would do conch, they would do tuna, as well. So they still had these Spanish-style, seafoods in the beef spaghetti, but it did not taste Spanish in the sense of the spices in there, like the paprika that was in there, the cumin that was in there was such, just gave the lime, like you don't think about spaghetti and lime, but squeezing the fresh lime across the top, was so fascinating. Like it just had this, Peruvian style that came up, and he's like, when you go to Peru and you eat that and you understand how they do pasta down there, it's like, but it's so far away. Peru is way different than Dominican Republic. And just like that one squeeze of lime gave me a whole another aspect of how connected we are through food.
Well, I love that you included it in the book, because when I saw that picture, it reminded me of my mom's spaghetti. We did Haitian spaghetti. It looks a lot like this, but...
So Stefan is mad at me because I didn't put the Haitian spaghetti in the cookbook, but I told him, he needs to get his own publisher and write his own...
Yeah, right, exactly, his own cookbook.
Yeah, write his own cookbook, One quick note, though, that in a lot of ways, especially on the south side of Chicago, you will see spaghetti in long form. You'll see it in broken form, too. Like, we'll break it and bake it and things like that. And when I approached him about doing it for this, he said they would never, ever do that. They said they would never break it and things like that. It has to be in that format. And it's the way that they eat it. And also it helps because like with the kids eat it with their hands, so they kind of wrap it around their fingers and eat it that way. So we were going to do a broken spaghetti, and we took that whole recipe out.
Wow. Yeah. So you talked about the podcast earlier. This book has inspired a podcast called, right, after the name Roots, Heritage, Soul. What made you want to continue the conversation in that format, and what other stories have emerged? Was there anything you wish you had included in the book that didn't make it?
Well, with Soul, I wrote Soul first, and we did a podcast with that, and so it made sense to do a podcast with Roots, Heart, Soul after that, in order to do so. But there were so many things that we could not capture in this one book. So in infinite wisdom, we just kept writing because we were in COVID and we had nothing else to do. So there's a whole nother section of the book that didn't make it in the book because the book was too big. So we got to the Southwest around, the Buffalo Soldier stories, and then we were going to California, and all of California is not. So that hopefully will start the third book. With the podcast, though, there's so many people who are doing so many great things who may not either have the platform or they need to share a platform. And that's what we really want to do with the podcast. And then it's opening up a whole set of different conversations about things that I didn't even think about, from the world of food. Where, we had Sean Chavis. Sean Chavis helped me write Soul, and she's into healthcare and weight loss. So we had a whole episode just on weight loss, her weight loss journey in the book. Her weight loss journey in life. And like so many people, commented on it and wanted her information, and they wanted to do it. So now she has this whole, her whole TikTok channel now, and her wellness channel, and all these things. And so I just want to capture as many people's stories as possible, help them tell their story to as many people as possible. and then, let's sit down and just have genuine conversations about what the world is about.
And you can find the podcast where?
You can find podcasts, of course, where all podcasts are. Apple, Spotify, and then also we do upload on YouTube, and we film every Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Instagram.
So I love that Roots Heart and Soul is rich in color, but also approachable. One of the hardest things I think people may imagine if they buy the book is, how do I get all this stuff from these spices and ingredients that aren't even from my own culture? Where do I find all this stuff? And the cooking techniques that they use in different cultures as well. How did you make the recipes approachable? And what was your strategy for making them accessible to everyone, right, without losing their soul and complexity?
The first thing is that no ingredient you have to order. So you don't have to go to Amazon or any place like that to order ingredients. You can go to any grocery store, I think. I hate that word, but you can go to the ethnic aisle, I guess. I don't know how you have an ethnic aisle in a grocery store, but it's just food. But, but you can find stuff there if you can't find it. Secondly, the recipes are in even numbers. They're 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2 cups of this, 2 cups of that, 4 cups of that, and a teaspoon. Because everyone does 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Us crazy musicians like myself do 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So I took that out of the equation. And then there's all kind of linchpins of stuff in there. I mean, onions, just basic things, onions, peppers, celery. But this is basic food, just done really delicious. And when you think about it, and there's a playlist in the book, and it's playlist in soul because people cook in rhythm. And I want to make sure that people, use their senses in cooking so that when you frying fish or you put bacon in a pan, it's loud when it starts and it's roaring. And when it gets done, the pan becomes quiet. So, you don't have to sit there and watch it. You just listen to it. When you think about, when something's burnt because the whole house is full of smoke, right? you know the tragedy of something bad, so why don't you know how to use the senses to find something good, you know what whipped cream looks like. When you whip cream and it stands up the peaks, you already know that, but the same thing, the mixer is loud, it becomes quiet. But also just the joy of cooking when you find that rhythm, you find your place in the kitchen. I tell people, you have to stand tall at the stove. It demands your attention. It demands your respect. All these farmers, ranchers, these fishers out here every day, hot sun, the migrant workers that we're losing, every single day who are cultivating and pulling vegetables out of the soil by hand, that we have to stand tall. We have to respect the ingredients. We can't just throw food away. We had to make fried rice because you can't just throw rice away. You have to utilize everything. If you roast a whole chicken, you got to make chicken soup. Mm-hmm. So it's just, the way it is and the way it's always been.
Thank you for that. Y'all, you would have gotten some cards as you came in and wrote your questions. We'll be collecting those cards soon, so please go ahead and write your last questions if you can and send them to the end of the eye. I will be reading them when I get to the ends of my questions here. And if you need a card, feel free to raise your hand because we're in the back there and they'll give you some. See, hands are already up. That's great. Thank you. So we'll get those distributed to you. This is my longest question. I got to read it. So here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, we explore how the legacy of slavery continues to shape cultural expressions across the African diaspora. And I don't know how many of you got a chance to see it, but we have a great new exhibition up right now called In Slavery's Wake, which connects global Black communities through shared experiences of resilience and creativity. So how does Roots, Heart, and Soul participate in that same conversation, especially through food?
I had to reread that question like 5 times because I had to do some wordsmithing to really understand. The thing about the recipes and where we started in the book is that you really have to dive into your own family's history to even further appreciate how you all here are tying the whole story together. And what I mean by that is that I started out at Kroger. I left college, I went to Kroger, and I was a butcher there. And here it is, I'm proud to be a butcher and things like that. And then writing this book, my Auntie Cherie, who's in the book, we were driving around Chicago looking at food and taking pictures and things like that. And she just blurted out, well, your great-great grandfather was a butcher too. And I never, ever, ever in my entire life ever heard anyone talk about my grandfather being a butcher in Chicago, you know. And so when you start understanding that here it is that in my own family, I'm doing something unique in my family, at least I thought I was doing something unique, and the story was not passed down to me, you know, except for me writing or exploring my own family history. That story would never be told. And so what you all are doing here, and what Roots Heart Soul is doing, is that we're telling these stories of people through food in order to give people a pathway to connect their self to their own family history. And that's only can be done through food, because if you go into a restaurant and everyone's breaking up in the restaurant, the food ain't no damn good, right? I mean, that's typical, right? No one wants to go to a place where the food is bad. But if you sit down with somebody and you have a conversation and you have the most crispiest fried chicken in front of you, right? You know, and the mashed potatoes are mashed perfectly, and the gravy is gravy, and you got hot sauce. You got to have hot sauce. If you come to my house and you have fried chicken, and you don't have hot sauce with it, you may not be invited back. But that's a whole nother story. But really, when you think about it, what you all are doing here is interlocking people through a delicious journey of self-discovery. It's what food is responsible for. It's creating those memories. If I said pound cake right now, I guarantee everyone in here is going to close their eyes, go in the back of their head, they're going to have that whiff of that butter caramelizing in the oven, you know? And they're going to know that somebody's grandmother made the best pound cake.
Yep. For me, that's my partner. He makes the best pound cake. He's here in that room. If you could show the picture of the Ebony Test Kitchen. I was really thrilled to see that you included the Ebony Test Kitchen in the cookbook, because I worked on bringing the Ebony Test Kitchen into our museum's collection. So we have it here at the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and we're working to get it on display over the next few years. So for those of you who don't know about the Ebony Test Kitchen, it was the kitchen that Ebony magazine food editors used to create all those recipes that got published in Dayton with a Dish for decades and decades. And as you can see, it's really psychedelic. It's going to be a great place when it's on display. But tell me why you chose to include it in your cookbook. We didn't pay you to do that, so.
Right.
And what significance do you feel it has?
One is that, you know, I mean, I used to read Ebony as a kid. You know, our parents always had it. Two, Ebony Test Kitchen was in Chicago, you know, so just growing up seeing it is nostalgia. And three, if I could have a kitchen that looks that bad right now, you know, like that is, but to me, that's culture though. I mean, I just wanted to tell a different side of our culture, but I wanted to expand it a little bit past 1960 and the soul movement, and understand that this might have went to the soul psychedelic movement or soul, you know, funk movement, you know, and how even through a visual understanding that our food has always elevated, but kept the same roots and where it came from.
And of course, the Chicago connection, right?
Oh man,
Chicago
of course. I
and
mean, and I remember, you know, us going down there as a kid, because there was a big cafeteria in there as well, and we ate there, and it was really like you could sit there and see all the stars, you know, would come in there and eat, you know. I remember distinctly that my dad got in a lot of trouble because Diana Ross was in there and he was fawning all over her, and my mom didn't like it so much. So I just remember all those connective stories, and just like being able to just share that with people. I don't think most people even understand how influential the Ebony Test Kitchen was.
Yeah, and we're excited to be able to share it with you all someday in the future soon. Yep. What advice would you give to young Black chefs who are trying to honor their heritage while also building a successful culinary career?
The first thing is, don't care what anybody thinks. Just, if it's yours, cook it. You know, don't care. The second thing is, charge people what it's worth. You know, I say it all the time. You can take a steak, you know, put it on the grill, 25, 30 minutes, you can charge between $29 and up to hundreds of dollars for. You take a pot of collard greens, you have to wash them, cut them, you know, make the stock, cook them, let them sit for a day, and you can charge $7, $8, $9, you know, for them at the max. Well, I know your DC prices are a little bit high, so I won't mention the name of the restaurant, but I did have some $13 collard greens the other day, you know. But still, you just think about it though. Like, you have to charge accordingly for our food ways. it has always been seen as too cheap. How can we keep the communities going where the taxes are going up, the cost of food is going up, but we don't charge accordingly? And anybody who doesn't want to support you, you can give it away for free. They're not going to support you anyway. So you might as well charge people what it's worth. You know, it's the king of food. It deserves a king's ransom.
That's amazing. I love that. So while I wait for the questions to come up here, tell us about your own culinary journey, because you didn't have like a traditional, right? Thank you. A traditional path.
No.
To owning restaurants and
No,
working in restaurants. Tell us about that.
My
Were
family.
you a physics major?
Yes, my family were nerds. We were the big nerds in high school. Interesting story that, you know, Gloria is my wife now. We went to high school together. She turned me down in high school, so I got that cheerleader now. So, you know, but we went to Hyde Park High School, and we were at the University of Chicago at the same time. We kind of had this dual education. And then I was going to University of Illinois, Chicago, then went to University of Illinois, Champaign, and was transferring to Georgia Tech, and was in the physics program. But I was really bored. I mean, because we were in college, you know, taking college classes, you know, all through high school, and got down there. I went down for Freaknik in Atlanta. People said it was a bad thing, but I survived it, so I think it was great. But I just stumbled into Kroger and started, you know, butchering. There was another restaurant across the street that needed somebody to work the grill. Started there. But to me, it's the same applied science. We think about the physics of it, but also my parents put us in music school. So, you know, playing music, you know, started on guitar at 5. It fed both sides of my brain, you know, the really scientific side, but also the artistic side, what food does. But then there's a bit of insanity that goes along with it, because we cook all these dishes and we put them out, we put them in a window, and it is fleeting, it is decaying, it is going away right in front of my eyes. And I spend repetition day after day after day trying to recreate that moment in time every single time. And, you know, people think that, you know, everything is supposed to taste the same, but all chickens don't taste the same. You know, collard greens in different seasons have different, you know, thickness of leaves. So nothing tastes the same all the time. So we have to kind of get as close to it as possible. So when you see chefs, you know, like, you know, Gordon Ramsay was notorious for just going crazy, but it's really just that boiling point that you have as a chef, that you're trying to recreate something, knowing that you can never, ever do that exact thing that you did so well just 5 seconds ago.
Wow.
Question time.
Question time. You mentioned repurposing food, making fried rice out of rice, et cetera. How can I figure out recipes to repurpose leftovers?
That's a sore spot in our house because I don't eat leftovers. I cook them for everybody, but I don't eat that much anyway. But you know, the biggest thing is really giving yourself enough time to plan. I tell people that to begin with. You know, most delicious leftovers are usually for breakfast. You know, so you know, you have a steak left over. That's either steak and eggs or hash. You know, we think corned beef hash kind of came out of that same genre of food. Things like grits, you know, like you make a pot of grits, and it's like, what I'm gonna do with the rest of them? Well, you cut them up in cubes, throw in some flour, and you fry them. Now you got fried grits, you got great croutons. So it's really just using the appropriate technique for what you have left over. And secondly, you know, there's more technology. Like freezing things is so great right now. Freezers are some of the best ways to preserve things. I mean, we made some crowder peas, you know, and stuff like that. And, you know, we got a big batch of crowder peas in our freezer, you know, and every time we want some, you know, we bring them out, we heat them up. So use all the sources around. But also, you know, if it's something fresh, eat it, you know. And if you made too much, call somebody over, you know. You know, so build a community that way as well. You know, you don't want it to go to waste. Call somebody over. You know, if you cook that well, I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of people coming,
Right.
knocking on the door anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, who doesn't want a meal, right? How do you honor traditional recipes while also giving yourself permission to change or reinterpret them? Like, where is there a line?
There's always a line, but it's judged by people who can't do it.
Tell us what that means.
So, people, barbecue is one of the easiest foods to judge because most people can't do it themselves. They don't have this equipment, they don't have the time, they don't have that, so they can always say, well, this don't taste right and things like that. And I always invite them, well, go buy a smoker, get a 12-pound brisket, learn how to cook it, so that brisket is lean on one side, fatty on the other side. How do you cook a brisket to make sure that the lean doesn't get overcooked, but the fatty? So, like I said, it's always that. When it comes to tradition, though, what do you have, So me and my sister, we're 7 years apart. My sister and I grew up in the same house. We're 7 years apart. When I left home, she spent a lot of times with my neighbors next door from Arkansas. My sister, collard greens, has collards and turnips in her collard greens. She puts turnips in there. Me, I never put turnips in collard greens, But my sister and I grew up in the same household. That's how she makes hers, So, in our own family, we have different traditions based off the same dish, And during certain times of the year, I actually prefer to eat hers because, collard greens, can get, bitter at certain times. That turnips, can add at the right time some sweetness, or in between harvests, sometimes you want to have it. My mom put butter in the water for rice. My dad, whose family came out of Louisiana, my dad would not eat that rice. My dad, rice had to be salt, water, and that's it. He would put his hand in the pot, let the water come up above his wrist. That was his measurement. I grew up with 2 pots of rice as a kid. So the next day, Dad would make red beans for this rice. Mom would make rice pudding for this rice. So you just take it for what it's worth and just make sure it tastes good.
Right. A lot of us are trying to reconnect with our roots, including through food. What advice would you give to someone trying to learn about their family's culinary history?
In someone's drawer at the house, somebody has some recipe cards somewhere. And that's the first thing you have to do. You have to go find those recipe cards. And then you have to stand back and scratch your head. You got to figure out what the hell were they making, I still don't know why my grandmother to this day made ambrosia. I do not know why she made it. I don't know what the inspiration was for her making it. And I made it one time, and I vowed I would never, ever make it again. But, that's the first thing you do. The second thing you do is, if you don't have any, make your own. Everyone is spread out. My kids are spread across the country. Our family is spread out. Collard greens in California don't taste like collard greens in Georgia. So make your own traditions if you don't have any. But you have permission to do so as long as you're telling, the story at the table of where it came from.
Yeah. And I also want to say that everyone here is so lucky today, because back when I was in college, it was analog. YouTube was not around. So when I wanted to learn how to cook my mother's, I had to call her, write every ingredient down, write all the steps of the recipe, and figure out what her measurements meant, right? It's a whole different world today.
Well, the thing is that, we talk about a pinch of this and a pinch of that, but one thing about the person who's doing the cooking, their pinch is a measurement.
Right.
So you just have to be willing to get your hand smacked, and while they're pinching, you just pinch with them, and, get your hand out of my stuff, but that's how you figure it out, And my great aunt, Mary Ellen, she's 92, 3, she still makes pound cake, and my recipe in Seoul is her pound cake recipe, and she has other ones, and no one has the recipes, except for Romel, which is her oldest son, and myself, and it's because you had to stand there next to her, you had to put 1 egg yolk in at a time, except for on the 6th one, you put 2 egg yolks in. That's what she did.
Tell us a little bit more about some of those common threads that you trace in your book that connect cuisines across the diaspora, whether they're ingredients, cooking methods, or a manner of consumption.
I would say the cooking methods, the stewed cooking methods, were probably the longer cooked items were probably the ones I found fascinating the most, because the way the cooking vessel was placed on the table afterwards. And They're always round or oblong, and so everyone had a place at the table to sit. So that to me was connecting. The basic ingredients of onions, garlic are so prevalent across all of those. Tomato comes in a different way, and the different types of cooking, requires tomatoes to be added at a certain time. The coast, though, is something totally different than being landlocked when it comes to these recipes, though, which I don't think that I understand it because I cook every day, why catfish is fried and now grilled, because it makes sense to be grilled, when you think about the amount of oil in it coming from a river fish. But catfish does not translate well to coastal recipes in the sense of things you can do with snappers and stuff like that. Like you will not have catfish tartare, right? Or catfish ceviche, right? Like, no, everybody like, no, we ain't doing that, right? Right? But then you think about it, if I said, if I took a catfish and approached it like a sardine, because of the oil content that they have, and I can smoke it, I can grill it, I can fry it, I can pickle it, then I have that same kind of cultural connection there. And I think those kind of things, when you start understanding that the technique also is derived from where you are to water, makes a bigger difference to cuisines than we might give credit to, because everything is so available. You can get king crab from Alaska right now. You know, online, you'd be at your door in 2 days. I mean, so you're like, well, you think it's just that easy, but it's really, really not. When you get to real cooking techniques, it's quite difficult if you're not understanding the true nature of the fish and what you're getting.
Love that. What's a dish from the book that completely surprised you, either in the way it came together or how people responded to it?
I think we had a picture of it, the Puerto Rican steak. That was so good. I mean, the whole house just lit up. And I used flat iron steak on that one. And flat iron, most people don't know that flat iron is probably one of the most versatile pieces of meat that you can get from a cow, because you can braise it and it'll be the best pot roast that you ever had. And you can do it like a steak. So when I think about this steak recipe, and sofrito on top, we seared it, and then we put it in tomato and braised it, but it still had the tenderness of a braised piece of meat, but had the flavor of a steak. That to me was so fascinating that someone had the knowledge to do so, to take this piece of meat that a lot of times people don't really know what to do with and make it that delicious. But also then culturally, like, you don't think about steak in Puerto Rico in the sense of food, like a steak is considered elevated or things like that, And I'm like, I never heard of this dish in the context of it being elevated. This one right here. I mean, the onions, all that stuff. When I think about this dish, I mean, it just gives me like so much respect for this cuisine, in the sense that something so simple, so done, could go on any white tablecloth in any place in the world and stand tall and stand proud and represent the people. So that to me is one of my most favorite dishes in the book.
Our last question is a doozy, y'all. Thank you for all your wonderful questions. Someone wants to know who won the debate about the best conch.
That's a good question. I think they still kind of sore about this. I mean, they went on a tangent. I mean, raw conch, and grilled conch. But the surprising thing is, then we started talking about a good friend of ours, Pierre Tom. And he was on No Reservations with Anthony Bourdain in the episode. And in the first book, Soul, there's a sea urchin recipe in the book that I wanted to do because I saw that episode. And the really great thing about the sea urchin dish is that they were in Sierra Leone, and Anthony Bourdain was talking to Pierre, and you saw that people look like us out there in the water spearfishing sea urchin, and they took it put it on the grill, cut it open, and we're just eating it like this great thing. And like again, talking about respect to cuisine and stuff like that, is that you go into sushi bars and and you see uni on the menu, and it's always market price, and it has this really high costs and things like that. And here it is, we're in Sierra Leone, and we're just out there spearfishing and eating this most luxurious items in Japanese cuisine, like it's like a sliced bread. And so when you think about what they're arguing about, is they're arguing about respect. They're arguing about also, what is the monetary value of the food that they are actually cooking. And to me, that was what I took out of it, is that not only are you all fighting about cultural respect, but how do you ensure that you're getting a fair price for what you're cooking?
Right, and monetary value, especially because a conch is so expensive right now, right? So
I mean, come on, conch, oxtails, anything that, oxtails is my fault, though. I will blame myself. I made a dish where I got my third Beard nomination, was oxtail spring roll. And we smoked the oxtail, pulled all the meat off of it, made the spring roll. Instead of using only cabbage, we used a combination of pickled collard green stems, and things like that rolled inside of it. And that dish was written about so much. And then after that, all the French chefs wanted to do oxtails, so I'll take that one.
So now we want to taste your oxtail, right? Do we have that on the menu tonight? I'm not sure, but we'll find out.
We'll find out.
There's lots of good food out there.
Well, if they don't have them tonight, I do know that they will have the menu tomorrow at the cafe as well.
That's right.
I ate the oxtails today. I almost smacked somebody because they were so good. The pickles is good. They had the grilled catfish. They had the corn today, jasmine rice. And they had the butternut squash and arugula salad with cranberries.
And y'all, you can get a dining pass to come eat in the cafe. You don't necessarily have to have a ticket to go see the museum to eat here, so know that as well. I just want to thank you for being here with us. And I have one more question. Where can we eat your food outside of the museum today and tonight, around the country and in Atlanta? Where can we find out more about you as well and your different platforms?
So most of my restaurants are in airports. So LAX, we have Chicken and Beer, where we did with Ludacris. There's another Chicken and Beer in Atlanta, which was the first one. Native by Naisha did with Naisha Arrington. Everyone's seen Next Level Chef with Gordon Ramsay. We did her restaurant there. Atlanta, I'll come back to that. So DC, Timber Pizza partnered with there. We just opened Rappahannock Oyster in IED, Gatsby in IED. Opening Philadelphia in 5 weeks, 2 restaurants there. I have 2 in Newark. But the one that I'm really most proud about is that my wife and I just signed a lease for a restaurant in McDonough, about a mile and a half from our house. So we'll be opening that in August. And if you want to test the relationship, open a restaurant with your significant other and see how that goes. But it's really something that I think we want to do. We want to have a legacy of our own cooking for our family and kids. And also, I have Soul and Krog Street Market. So
Great. Thank you so much, Chef Richards.
it's my pleasure.
And then we've got Leslie coming back out here. Hold on, y'all.
Let's give another round of applause for such a rich conversation. Also want to thank Deputy Director Commander for such a wonderful opening to initiate this conversation. So this was a rich conversation, and dare I say a delicious one as well, that probably left most of us hungry, but you're in luck. So as you exit the theater and make your way to the concourse, we will begin our food tasting. So I hope you brought your appetite, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation as well as the food. I also want to acknowledge that our partners of our museum shop, Smithsonian Enterprises, will be selling the book upstairs. They're signed copies by Chef Richards, so please go upstairs and have the opportunity to purchase a book as well as speak with Chef Richards. So we have a lot to offer you tonight, and I hope you all enjoy it. So thank you so much again. I hope you have a wonderful dining experience and a wonderful evening. Thank you.